Okay, so welcome to episode 31 guest, Amanda Delaney, I'm the former promo kitchen guy. You're the current promo kitchen girl. Well, we have this legacy between us. We have this age-old relationship. I'm so excited to bring you on to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Roger. I'm very excited to be here.
Okay, so I feel like today's interview, the word that I kept thinking about as you and I were preparing to come on to the show today was serendipity. Okay, because there's a whole lot of things that are going on that are coalescing all at the same time on this particular episode of the show that are so interesting to me. So in addition to you being a return guest, in addition to us having what we feel like is a really interesting topic to talk about, today marks the first episode of the show that I have a sponsor not called Social Good Promotions.
Holy moly, who are they?
So let me tell you about this. So Amanda Delaney, you have made your life working as a territory sales rep in field sales, correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay, and so you've witnessed the evolution of technology and the advent of CRM systems.
Yes.
Where you track your relationships in a cloud-based computing platform. The problem for most field sales reps is it's not intuitive and there's no artificial intelligence ideas built into it. Today's sponsor of the show, first-time sponsor, Badger Maps. Imagine if you could lay out your route of where you needed to go and it tell you the most accurate way to go, the most efficiently by taking these particular roads. And when you're out in the field doing your activities, it links directly into your CRM. So when you're done with the call, you can mark it as done and move on to the next call. This thing is crazy good, but I love the guys at Badger Maps. They actually were just the last guest on the show. And they were talking about what happened when they looked at the 5,000 businesses that are using their program and what happened during the pandemic and how travel completely disappeared because they could see it in their data. So crazy, right? So Badger Maps, check it out.
I just wrote it down. I'm ready.
Free trial opportunity if you do badgermaps.com/so good promotions. Okay.
Bam.
So there it is. All right. So that's why this is serendipitous. So like who better to talk about that being a really good feature of something than the person who spent her entire career on the road making sales calls. At one point, you had an entire piece of content built around bathrooms on the road.
Yes.
And how gross that is, right?
Yes. Panera Bread bathrooms specifically are the most disgusting bathrooms. You think they're clean, but they're not. Do not use them on the road. Wawas. Stick to Wawas.
So that is why I loved the fact that like, okay, all of these things are coming together. What better testimonial than for you to say how important it was. So
important.
Okay. So you and I, wow, we've got a little bit of a meaty bone to chew on today. Don't we?
I'm ready for it.
Yep. So we're coming out of what has been probably the most surreal 16 months of our entire lives collectively, not just you and me, like anyone listening, anyone who says, oh yeah, like nothing really changed, please, come on.
Everything changed.
And for those of us who have made our careers in field sales, when an organization is trying to save itself because we work in a marketplace that contracted from $24 billion to 19, and in reality, it contracted from 24 billion to 13 billion because the other 6 was PPE. People didn't need salespeople. And as far as they were concerned, it was, this is a sinking ship and you are the deck chairs. And that's no affront to any supplier because every supplier needed to do, every business, no matter what industry you were in, respect. If you're still in business, respect, because you had to do what you needed to do. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't collateral damage.
Right.
That was done to people's careers and maybe more importantly, people's self-worth, people's mental health. And so much of what I'm talking about are things that you just went through. And so I thought it was incredible to have the opportunity to give you a chance to talk about like what happened. So Amanda, what happened?
What the hell happened?
Yeah.
That is a very, very good question. You know, I was very careful about who I said this to during the pandemic. And I think now that I'm using my air quotes here, on the other side of it, and I've learned what I learned, I feel a lot more confident saying this out loud. But when the pandemic hit, I blended in. My pandemic started in September of 2018, if I'm being completely honest. And it just kind of spiraled. You know, it was, I got let go from my job, not a COVID related thing. And one thing led to another, and I had all these plans, and, you know, I was selling all my stuff. I put my stuff in storage. I go to Expo, or big industry trade show of the year, every January. None of us thought that was going to be the last time we'd see each other for, you know, a long time. And I had opportunities, and I felt great. And I had a plan, and that plan fell through on Wednesday of Expo. The show ends on Thursday. And super long story short, I found myself on a Greyhound bus from Las Vegas going back home to Seattle. Now, going back home to a place that I do not like to go home to, you know, I lost my mom it'll be 6 years ago next month. And then in the next year, I lost two of my best friends to suicide, and that kept happening. So over the course of the past almost 6 years, the only time I've gone home really has been for a funeral. I haven't really talked to my family since her funeral. And so just a lot of things that I purposely did not want to address, right? So I find myself going home, asking if I can stay with my best friend. I thought that taking the Greyhound bus, well, first of all, it was my only option, let's be real, money-wise. But I thought it'd be a very humbling experience. And during this whole time, you know, my world's turned upside down before. You know, I lost my mom, I lost my job, I kind of made my comeback and came back in. So I'm not a stranger to chaos, and I do really well in survival mode. However, riding a Greyhound bus for 36 hours is not a humbling experience. I have never felt more disgusting in my life. And then, you know, fast forward from there, the pandemic hit. So as I'm kind of trying to figure out what am I going to do, and, you know, it's not just that I lost my job. I've been in this industry for 19 years. I think whatever industry you're in, if you've been in it for a long time, that's kind of your identity. It's what you do, right? I'm a very career-driven person, and that's my whole life. But for us in promo, that's my lifeline. Those are my friends. Those are my family. These are the people that know the most about me, people that I might only see 3 times a year, that I know if I need anything, I could call them hands down without question, more so than probably some of my friends from back home, you know? So when all of that goes away.
Well, and really, if you think about it, anyone that works in a trade show driven industry,
right,
was going through this. So the wedding trade show industry was going through this.
Yep.
The hospitality industry was going through this.
Yep.
Food and beverage, people who were used to coming to a place to socialize with one another every single day of their careers, all of that for every one of those people completely and utterly went away.
Gone
overnight.
Like that. Yep.
And so
it was crazy. I remember watching, I was at my cousin's house in Aberdeen, my hometown. And I remember sitting there with him on the couch, and then, like, when the day of the shutdown happened, and I'm like, this is so insane. Now, mind you, I'm in Aberdeen, Washington, a very, very small town. I kept saying throughout the pandemic, I'm not really experiencing a pandemic, you know? I mean, there was like 8 of us that when the shutdown happened, we hung out and rode John Deere tractors and drank some beers by the fire. And, you know, that was our quote unquote quarantine. I didn't have it to feel like a lot of other people did. And then I eventually came back to living in Florida, which is a lawless place. And we all know that the shutdown didn't quote unquote there. So I kept saying that the pandemic didn't really affect me. If anything, it kind of helped me blend in, because everybody was now in the same situation that I had found myself in. But looking back, now that I'm back in action, it 1,000,000% affected me. You know, your options go away, the options of hope, or other suppliers I'd been talking to about, in the beginning of second quarter, let's look at this, let's look at that. You know, I'm thinking I have kind of my pick, almost not my pick necessarily, but the next place I go, I'm going to be strategic about it. I'm going to be intentional about it. And then all hope of all of that goes away because all of a sudden it's like our industry just got shut down. People are getting let go left and right. My friends are having to start different businesses that, like it's pivots on pivots, it was insane. So yeah, that happened. And then bam, what do you do?
And I know from our relationship, the severity of what happened.
Yep.
And we all had to deal with that in differing ways. What they say, it was same storm, different boats.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And you may understand the circumstance of what's going on, but you have no idea what people are going through.
No.
So what were you going through?
I feel like it was an identity crisis almost. I had gone through something a few years previously where, like I said, I lost my mom, my world turned upside down. The company that I worked for that I was going to retire from let me go for very good reasons. And I've said it once, I'll say it a million times, that saved my life, and I handled that situation very poorly. I think people have heard that story. If you haven't, super long story short, I chose to handle my grief with a lot of alcohol, a lot of Xanax, whatever else I could really get on my hands. And I don't remember a whole lot of a year and a half. So fast forward, I get the help I need. I spend a year sober, all this clarity, great. Not great. It was hard, and then I came on the other side of it. And, I ended up seeking therapy outside of the program because I came to, that wasn't my problem. And I had a lot of stuff that I had to deal with. So I did. And I feel like I'm on top of my career, right? I deal with that. I make this comeback. I go from being, I feel like I kind of made a comeback. I feel like I had found my purpose. I was hanging with the right people and I was, speaking at SKU camp. And then all of a sudden, everything just fell from underneath me. And everything happens for a reason. I believe that. And trust me, it was it was definitely both of us needed to move on, that particular company and myself at that time. But everything else that was happening, your friend groups, your circles, it's interesting what happens when you're really, really on top of your game and then something happens. And I just felt like I felt shunned almost. Like I felt like that weird kid in high school, or I felt like I was no longer a part of this industry. And this industry is my life, like we were talking about before we started recording. It's your friends, it's your family, it's your whole lifeline, and
we call that Ohana. And that's Hawaiian for family. And what the Hawaiian culture believes is your family is not just the blood relatives that you have, it's the people that you choose.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful, emotional, like amazing way to consider what family is about.
Yeah.
And I think this is why this is so important for you to be telling this story, because unlike times in the past when your rug was pulled out from underneath you, there were two things kind of going on here. And this, I think, is important for anyone who's in a struggle of any proportion. When you believe that you've recovered from the struggle, only to have the rug pulled out from underneath you yet again, there are a lot of people that, depending on the number of tugs of the rug you're on, people will give up.
Yep.
And the only thing you can't do is give up. But the more often the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, the more challenging it becomes, because it's even more frustrating when you think, I've built this one back better. The next hurricane will not knock me down. Guess what? It knocks you down.
And it knocks you down harder.
Okay. But this time you had a community of people. So talk about why that was so important to you and what we're talking about. Like, what am I talking about when I say you had a community of people?
Well, I feel like at that time, I didn't know who my community of people was anymore, and I think that was the scariest part for me. I don't know who to trust. I felt like people just dropped me. And then I felt like, okay, everybody's going through this pandemic. Everybody's going through their own. It's not all about you. You know what I mean? I'm sitting in this place. I have no money. I'm back home in my hometown where I'm, for the first time, having to literally look at my mom's house that I cleaned out almost 6 years ago. And I'm having to actually accept the fact that she's gone, which I hadn't done. I'm having to face all these things I went to therapy to work on and deal with, but now I'm literally back in that location having to deal with it, seeing family. And I didn't feel like I had my promo community that I could reach out to and kind of help me through it, which I had always had before. So you really learn to sit by yourself because there's nothing else around. And looking back on it was some of it in my head, was it, who knows, but that's your reality at the time, right? Yep. And our community, especially in the specific industry, Roger, we are so dependent on each other. And so to feel like you have all that completely taken away. So I have no money. I'm living out of an OGO 9800 suitcase that I went to Vegas in with my dead mom in this like box. Like, this is all I have. And I lived out of that same OGO 9800 suitcase for, until 2 months ago, essentially, when I moved into my house. So there was just nothing. Looking back on it, I just feel like I'm this person all alone walking through this life. I don't know who to turn to. Nobody knows what to do. Like, all hope of everything just seemed to be gone. And you just feel like you're in a very, very dark place. And the only thing I knew is that I have enough experience where things do work out. So I have enough experience to hold on to that blind faith, right? But that does not make it easier. I knew things would work out. I knew that this was happening for a reason. I knew I was supposed to pay attention to the signs and follow the synchronicities. I knew all of this. I've spent a lot of time and money in therapy. I have the tools in my toolbox, right? But it does not make it easier. And Correct. The one thing that I knew I couldn't do was fall back on what I had fallen back on before. Because one, that's not a good place to be in. I don't want to be in that place. Two, I don't know if my community thinks that I've like fallen off the wagon again or not. You know what I mean? It was just all of this noise in my head that I had to figure out how to calm down with no home, no vehicle, no income, and back in a place where like I feel like my whole past is facing me all at once that I thought that I had gotten past. It was a very, very, very interesting 6 months that I spent back there. I remember I don't know what to do. I've sold everything that I possibly can. I was door dashing. Here I am in my mid 30s and felt like I was on top of my career at one point. And, I'm doing everything. My sales are growing and I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. And then that still gets taken away. And it's hard for me when things get taken away from me where I did not sabotage them myself.
Right.
Because that's very confusing, So I was like, well, I guess I'll DoorDash. I was door dashing, listening to Mike McAllowitt's books and as many industry podcasts as I possibly could, and was like, just keep continuing your education. Because from the mental health standpoint, sure, I could have gone and take a job at Walmart maybe, right? But I'm not saying that I'm above that, but from a mental health standpoint, when you've loved what you're doing so much in your whole life and your people and everything, all I'm thinking about is how can I come back into that industry when it opens back up and how can I be better than I was before? But God, it is not easy to push through. And just because you know that things are going to work out doesn't mean that you do not get so tired of fighting.
Okay, so I'm riveted. Like, you got the movie there's a turning point, and then something happened. What was the turning point for you?
So I was having a FaceTime call actually with a friend of mine, Katie Kalick. And we had met on a common SKU happy hour. So we call each other, we're pandemic friends. And we just became great friends. But our very first conversation that we were having, we're like, hey, let's connect, whatever. And I remember looking at her thinking, this girl is who I used to be. She had passion. She had drive. She's talking about she's not sitting around waiting for the pandemic to end. She's part of the group like us who are, okay, what are we going to do to make this happen? And whatnot. And she just had the spark in her. And I saw myself that I clearly did not have that spark anymore, and mind you, in the meantime, I'm getting paid cash on the table for a distributor that I started my career in 19 years ago. And that turns into I won't go into details, but a very abusive gaslighting situation that I had to, again, get myself out of. And all these things just kind of, kept coming. And I'm having this conversation with Katie and I'm like, I'm just going to shoot my shot. There were a few suppliers that I knew that I wanted to work for. I reached out to one of them and said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I think I can bring to the table. I want to be a part of your brand. P.S. I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, but think of me. Right. And a week later, I had an offer and moved to Tennessee a week after that. Now, fast forward 4 months later, it was not a good fit. And I knew that it's not where I wanted to be. And I think that's one part of going through hell. Like I'm in the middle of like going through hell for the second time in my life. And I knew that this was not going to be a good place for me or for them. Right. So after 4 months that ended, and that was scary, but it got me closer to where I wanted to be. At least
that it gave you to you.
It gave me my confidence back.
You took a game winner and you hit the bucket.
Yeah.
And once you hit one, it's like, well, I hit one.
Let's keep on rolling.
What else can happen, right? So
yeah, exactly. So, and that was a very interesting experience. And fast forward again, I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I felt that I was closer to where, getting where I wanted to get to. And anyways, I came back to Florida, and that was really the turning point for me, where I was like, okay, I can do this, So I was going to intentionally put myself back in Florida. This was in January, because here I am again. I just moved into an apartment. So when I say I was quote homeless for 16 months, 2 of those months I did have an apartment. I have to leave that again. I have to break that lease. It's just kind of this constant. But at this point, because I had given me some of my confidence back, and because I had started, I guess, reaching out, like I became, Oprah Winfrey has this quote that says, God, what is it? Everyone wants to ride in the limo with you, but nobody wants to ride, but what you want to find is somebody who will ride in the bus with you when the limo breaks down. I found those people. Yep. And a good friend of mine, Teresa Mazzullo, told me kind of during that same time too, you should always focus on cheering the people on who are cheering you on. Right. So I intentionally kind of made my circle smaller. Throughout this whole process, I found the value in really keeping a lot of my life a little bit more private and figuring out what I want kind of without my community. So I feel like I've learned some things along the way. I'm like, all right, Florida, here we go. Things are opening back up. Florida is a great market, a booming market for the industry. I know this territory like the back of my hand. I killed it in this territory before. Easy peasy, right? Call my friend Susie. I'm like, hey, can I stay with you maybe just for a few weeks? And then fast forward, that was in January. And I've been in my house now for 2 months. So that turned into much more than a few weeks. But I had conversations with suppliers, and it was just all these great conversations, and then nothing would happen. Great conversations, and then nothing would happen. And so that feeling of just being defeated and kicked down over and over and over again, it was just, it gets tiring. But I had learned from past experience, and our friend Matt Gerber always says, shoot your shot. And I'm like, all right, there's one more supplier that I would love to work for. And, in the meantime, though, I had really found a passion for being more involved with, nonprofits, and I got more involved with Promo Kitchen. And so just the way that I look at things matter. The voice I want to have in this industry kind of changed from, I think, what it once was. So I wanted to be very intentional about where I did go, because I didn't want to have the same situation that I just had twice in 1 year, So I shot my shot again, and thank God it worked out. And now, I'm with High Caliber Line, and what turned into a conversation about, hey, here's what I know about the Florida market, and your brand is way underrepresented here. Here's what I think you can do in Florida. It turned into will you manage the entire Southeast? So here we are.
But had you not been able to go and say, I don't just want you to give me a job. Here's why you need me to work for you.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And by having had the opportunity to get some wins under your belt while you were recovering from the last tug of the rug, talk about the role Promo Kitchen played and the community that you had of those supporters, and the way that surrounding yourself with people who share your beliefs can be even more confidence building.
It really can. And, when I say I intentionally kind of looked at my circle, and when we talk about community and really finding my community, Promo Kitchen saved my life. And I mean that very figuratively and literally. There was a time that I did not know if I was going to make it through this time again. Like I said, you have the tools and you know what to do, but mental health is a bitch. And I think I do a great job of managing it, and I talk about it, and that helps. But there was a time I did not know if I was going to make it through that last push.
Yeah.
And Promo Kitchen gave me the support from people that are a little weird and like to push boundaries and don't settle for the status quo like I do. And at this point, I knew that I was it wasn't an option of going to settle for another real job. It was everything had to be right. It had to fall into place because I just couldn't put myself back through those same situations. And I started talking about it a little bit with some of the people with Promo Kitchen, and it was Johanna Gottlieb and Kate Plummer who were like, hey, will you run this we did a scholarship for our good friend T Hamilton. Yep. And will you lead this committee? And I had never done that before. And I'm like, yeah. And, fast forward, I remember a couple of them were like, you're so good at project management. We had no idea. And at the time I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, that's totally my jam. But I'm thinking like, I had no idea I was this good at project management either. And so them like really empowering me.
Thinking about that. That's how I get my job done. Right.
Yeah. Right. And then exactly. I started thinking about it and I'm like, no kidding. I am very good at it. Like, thank you, ADHD and OCD and what other acronyms I have like floating around up here.
What a great for productivity.
Yeah. Right. God. And it's, so that just really opened my eyes to some other things. And my passion grew for the people, for the opportunities that they were giving me to empower me. That's one thing that I struggled with before. I felt like my empowerment had been taken away. I felt like I was kind of caged in and I wasn't able to do the things that I wanted to do, that I was spending my time educating myself on, so on and so forth. And, here's these people that just believed in me. And even as I kind of started letting them into a little bit more about what had been going on in the past, however long, it's not like I ran around and told everybody in Promo Kitchen, like, hey, I haven't been able to buy like underwear in a year and a half. Like things are really, really bad. But I kind of slowly started letting them in. And the more I did, the more they just lifted me up. And, that led into some great opportunities with Promo Kitchen where I'm able to kind of use that voice that I think I have to help change the industry for the better with this group of people that I just know if something bad were to happen again, that's not going to be the community that I'm ever going to have to worry about disappearing. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so it's been phenomenal.
If I end up with a headstone, what I would like put on my headstone is this quote that is usually attributed to me. I don't think anybody else has said it. I think it's mine. If you hang around with inspirational people long enough, you're bound to be inspired. It's like osmosis.
Yep.
And we hang around between and amongst us some of the most inspirational people you could ever meet.
Yep, we do.
And I count you in that community because when people are willing to express to you what it is that they've overcome in order to be able to be successful, that's the real magic. Because when you can see what people's all apparently on the surface seem like, oh my God, they're so together and they're so amazing and they're so talented. And then you dig into the story and you're like, oh my God.
Yep.
Right? And it's because of other people being willing to share that with each other that we all have this ability to be inspired to like, well, what can I really achieve? Because I'm watching all of the other amazing achievements going on around me. And each of those people who are doing those amazing things are going, you could do great things too.
Yeah.
It's almost as if it becomes an expectation. So if you're not hanging around in a community that inspires you that way, change the people you hang around with, people.
Yeah.
This is a great example of an instance when it is literally the difference between life and freaking death.
It literally is. And, it's that purpose you need, that drive that you need to, just kind of keep you going. You want to feel valued. People want to know that they're heard and cared about. And when you've gone through a period of time, and I'm in my own little bubble thinking, of course, like nobody's texted me in 2 days or, and then you get to this point where you realize that you're okay without that. And then you realize that I don't know. It's the evolving that a human being can do, first of all, I think is pretty incredible. I think the empowerment aspect of what those people around you, your tribe, what they're doing to lift you up. And, when my biggest fear was that if I started telling these people at Promo Kitchen who were literally saving my life every day and giving me this whole new drive to just do more good, in this world and with people, if I started telling them a little bit about what I was going through, what if they automatically go back to that Promo Kitchen podcast from 4 years ago? What if they automatically go back to, oh, what if she's like, you worry about that. You worry about your past catching up with you. Sure. And it was something that I worked so hard to overcome that I don't shy away from talking about necessarily. I'm not of it, but it's just not me anymore. So it's not something I try to focus on. So that fear of them feeling like that was very present. But like I said, the more I started letting them in, the more they just lifted me up and empowered me to do different things. And Johanna had told me that she was talking to a customer and she's like, it is amazing when you give somebody the empowerment, how they see what they're really, really capable of. And I see so many, especially now, suppliers and distributors, we're having issues. Apparently we're having supply chain issues. I don't know if you've heard. Oh, and labor shortage. It's a thing.
Labor,
I know, weird. I'll fill you in after. But, all of these things are happening and everybody's kind of butting heads. And it's the community and the coming together is, like you said, the difference between life and death sometimes. And I think that people are afraid to really dive into that. Like during the pandemic, how many times did we talk about like, hey, ask somebody how they are, ask somebody how they feel, but really, really mean it. I say that when I ask somebody how I am, I say right after, I mean that in a literal sense. I really want to know how you are. And I think people are afraid to say, oh, well, I'm not so great, because people shy away from that, or they think you can't handle that. And I was so afraid of the more responsibility Promo Kitchen kept giving me, that kept giving me more life, that led me to the confidence that I have to, go after this new job with High Caliber. If I hadn't started talking about it, because I had been so afraid of them thinking, one way, because that's all I had in my head experienced over the past year and a half, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. Yeah. But it takes a lot to like be vulnerable and just open up and just kind of like, hey, I'm not really having a great time. And I will tell you what, a few people, that awesome organization that now call me when they're going through things, when they're depressed, when they're having anxiety, when they don't know what to do.
Yep.
And in my mind, that's amazing. That makes it worth it. That makes it all worth it.
The fact that our community as a whole has rallied around the idea of like mental health is one of the singly largest, most important topics that we collectively can focus upon is, to me, if there's a ray of light that's come from what happened, it's that. And we have wholeheartedly, as a group, embraced this idea of we need to talk about it. We need to make it feel like it's a safe space for you to talk about it. And that if you feel like you need someone to talk to, there are a litany of people available to speak to you about anything that you happen to be going through, which God bless that we've gotten ourselves to a point where we can literally say like, I'm going through some stuff with my family right now. And I've been able to be very honest and candid with people about when you ask me how I am. I've historically, me to be the happiest person on the earth. And I have to be real and say, not so happy right now.
Right.
And it's liberating to be able to just say, like I'm here, I'm present, but that doesn't mean that my whole best person is here right now. And
that's so important, because you feel like, I know for me anyways, I spent so many years trying to keep this like this face on this surface, like, surface level, everything's fine, but everything's not fine. And that gets exhausting. It gets so exhausting. So being able to just say to someone, I'm not okay today, it's a bad day, and not have them think like, oh my God, she's not going to be able to do her job, or, you should be able to have those conversations. And being involved with Promo Kitchen has allowed me to be more involved with Promo Cares, which I love everything that you guys are doing. And, I've said, I've been talking about mental health more and more, and it was really difficult for me to want to do that because, again, everything I've been through before, you're worried of those stereotypes. And I think that's true, not just for our industry, but any industry. You have a rumor mill, right? And people make one mistake and you hold that against them forever. And I think this pandemic hopefully has opened people's eyes a little bit more to seeing like, hey, like people are going through their shit. People make mistakes. People handle grief and trauma in different ways. None of us are exempt to going down a bad spiral because something bad happened in our life, and I don't talk about mental health today because it's self-serving and it like does something for me. I have my therapist for that. Like, trust me, we talk often, but people need help. People are going through things, and I've been through those things. And I just went through the worst probably phase of my entire life. And I've had some bad things like happen in my life. And this was just from all angles, and talking about it moving my way through, talking about it. That's how I got to the other side of it. So I don't do it because I need a mental health boost. I do it because if one more person will reach out to me or you or somebody and say, I'm having a bad day. Sweet, let's talk about it. I'm having a bad day too.
And as we kind of close, it's really what I wanted to express, right? So people will ask me often, like, what's your podcast about? And unlike a lot of other podcasts about sales, we don't talk about sales techniques. We don't talk about anything to do with like how to move deals down funnel. Like I can talk about all of those things, but that's not what my podcast is about. Is we're human beings that happen to be salespeople.
Right.
In order to be able to do the job to the best of your ability, there's disciplines within each of us that we need to be mindful of and be working on in order to be the best possible salesperson we can be. And what I've witnessed in my time doing this is episode 105, 21,000 listens. What I know now is your brain is your single biggest asset when you're in sales.
Yes.
And if your game is not on, it's costing you money.
Yeah.
And when you can take defeat and turn it into inspiration, that's when you're the best salesperson you possibly could be. Just think like I just won the whole way through. Bullshit. Sorry. That's not the way it works.
No.
Because even if you're having a stellar sales career, most people's lives who have great sales careers are in the toilet because they're devoting too much of themselves to that pursuit at the expense of so many other things.
Yep.
So by being able to examine the different elements of what make us really successful salespeople, I am so grateful for you to be this vulnerable and this willing to come and talk to me and to have our group listen to you say, I almost was done and look at me now, and to be able to see that as part of your tribe and to know that you wanted to tell that story here with our audience. Thank you so much for that. I can't even express to you how honored I am that you wanted to come here to tell that story. And if you people out there are not inspired by this discussion, I don't really know what else. Right. So I mean, literally, I know I'm being sincere when I say this means the world to me.
And I wouldn't have wanted to tell it with anybody else but you. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I just know I'm not the only one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
So it's important, and it's I think the message that I'm trying to get across as I move forward, because I'm not discounting how strong I am. That's something I didn't do for a very long time. Like when you get through those memes you see about if all you did today was hold yourself together, I am proud of you. Word for word, in every literal sense, I feel that. And I know that I'm not the only person. And it is okay to have all the tools in your toolbox and know what to do. And okay, I'm feeling this way. This is where it's coming from. Like, trust me, like my therapist is always like, you could be my therapist, right? Like I'm very self-aware. And the message I think I want to get across is that it's like you said, your brain is your biggest asset. And so if something's going on up here, you can't fight to go look for another job. You can't go out and do your job the way that you want to do it, pandemic or no pandemic. And just because you're having these problems up here does not mean that you're a crazy person. It does not mean that you've gone off the rails. It means that you have some shit going on up here, and we should probably start talking about it, because I don't want to hear a story about another person who went to Mexico on a solo trip with full intentions to not come back.
Correct. And we will leave it right there because there's nothing more we need to say. God bless America. 4th of July weekend.
Woo!
Thanks to Badger Maps for the sponsorship. That's so cool. Thank you for the serendipitous interview, and I'm pumped. I'm go sell something.
You. Let's go sell stuff. Thank you.